South by Southwest Sydney. We're about to make a little bit of history here, ladies and gentlemen. It's really exciting. My name's Adam Spencer. I was honoured and humbled when I was asked if I would lead this conversation. The organisers thought, who can we get in the chair for the opening keynote? It has to be someone who just embodies the spirit of South by Southwest. And this woman does exactly that in sort of two ways. One, the sort of material she talks about, the way she walks us into the future is so core to the mission of South by Southwest. And also, she's just one of the brightest stars in the firmament of the Austin, Texas experience. When I asked her out the back a little while ago, how many times have you spoken in Austin? Her initial reply was quite a modest, I'm not actually sure. She's an absolute staple of the program there, where each year she comes and gets people to stare into the future. She's the CEO of the Future Today Institute. She's a professor at NYU's Stern Business School. She's a collaborator and creator with people who make television shows and movies set in the future. Forbes labelled her one of 5 women changing the world. CEO, professor, content maker, world changer. Reading her CV reminds me of that great Australian saying, pull your head in, pal. No one likes an overachiever. Please welcome to the stage Amy Webb, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey.
Wonderful to see you here.
This is awesome. I cannot believe that this is actually happening. I'm so excited.
We're making a little bit of history, aren't we?
We are. Did you know that it's my birthday?
Whoa, I did not know that.
So Hugh Forrest, who's like one of the most awesome human beings on the planet, he's the co-president of South by. I feel like he knew that it was my birthday and he wanted to give me the ultimate present, which was not one South by a year, but 2.
There you go.
Which is amazing. Now I can do this twice a year.
I'll just get you to flick the necklace.
Oh yeah, sorry. I said in advance, they were like, they asked me what type of microphone, and I said, I don't normally sit and talk. Sorry, I'm gonna take this off because it's gonna be annoying. We'll see if I can sit still for an hour.
Yes, that could be part of the challenge. Now, just before we kick off, I've watched you a few times from Austin. You are a genuine believer that it's not just the superstars like you and I on stage who make this happen.
Oh my God.
There is an army here.
Yes, it's not just a... How many of you have been to any South by stuff in the US before? Yes, you should applaud yourselves because you're awesome. Now here's the thing, for those of you who have not been and are like, did we just accidentally join a cult? The answer is yes, you did, and it's lovely. So the cool thing about South by is not, yes, obviously it's the panel sessions, but the best part of South by is the community. And that's the most exciting thing about, I've never been to Australia before. I mean, it's a long, am I allowed to say cuss words? Are we being streamed?
Yeah, knock yourself out.
Right,
You're in Australia, mate. That's one thing you'll learn very quickly about this country. We're not afraid of the occasional cuss word.
I'll fit in. It's a long-ass trip here from New York, is what I was gonna say. And I have been invited many times to Australia, and I'm like, I just cannot with the plane. But the one thing that got me here was this. So here's the thing. The sessions are great, but it's everybody that you're gonna meet here. It's standing on the line. So get your heads out of your phones. Even if you're an introvert, I promise you there are other introverts who will be. So don't do this while you're standing online. Talk to each other. The people who are here have self-selected to be at this place because South by is really a year-long community. And you're gonna meet that's literally, I mean, technically I'm here to do this right now, but I'm gonna be with all of you for the next couple of days until I have to get back on a plane to go home. Like, I'm gonna be in the panel sessions, I'm coming out to hang out and be at the events. And I owe so much professionally and personally to South by, which I've been going to for 20 years. It's totally changed my career path. I've met some of my closest friends. So it's really not just a thing that happens once a year, it happens all year long. And to that end, let me really quickly say, so I mentioned Hugh, who's, like I said, lovely and amazing, but the people who put this on are also lovely and amazing. So I wanted to say thank you to Colin Daniels, who's the CEO of South by this has been like a couple of years, I think, in progress now. Jeff Jones, who's the CEO of TEG, Fenella, who you just met this morning, and the people who often don't get the thank you, who are the volunteers. There's like 700 of them, I think. So They're amazing, and this would not happen without them. So when you see them, you should give them a high five and tell them thanks. They're all wearing T-shirts that indicate they're volunteers.
Fantastic.
I haven't allowed you to ask a question yet. I'm so sorry.
No, fire away. Don't worry.
All right,
that was a long-asked answer, as
it
they
was,
say.
It was.
No.
We've said ask twice.
And
three times.
really
Okay.
important that you mentioned that. You're absolutely right. You are a quantitative futurist. Now, you had me at the word quantitative.
Yep.
What's a quantitative futurist? What's the Q word mean in that?
Sure. So the field that I work in is called strategic foresight. It's been around for about a century. And the colloquial term for this type of work, the people who do it, is called a futurist. But there's different types of futurists who do different types of things. There are folks who work just in design, and so they are combining art and design with some of the modeling to figure out what's next. My background is game theory and economics, so the work that we do is building quantitative models to try to figure out plausible next order outcomes. And some of that are trends, those are some of the building blocks. But it is pretty rigorous in the weeds work, where we're sitting at desks most of the time and tinkering with models and running simulations.
I watched your presentation this year at South by, and there were a few fascinating things about it. First of all, there were people queuing there from 7 in the morning. A disproportionate percentage of the crowd Brazilian.
Yeah.
You're massive in Brazil.
I am.
What's your theory on that?
I think it's my hair. I have enormous hair, and I think that's part of it. And I think the other part of it is I can't, as you've noticed, I can't sit still. And so let me just put it this way. I think I'm a little bigger in Brazil than I am in the UK, which is a little more buttoned up.
You warned that your chart of the future this year in March, you said, strap yourselves in. It's not all going to be pleasant. It's going to be a bit of a scary one.
Yeah, it sucks that I was right? I mean, here we are.
It's going to be really fascinating to look 9 months on it, where we've come from then. One thing that you do, and the way that you look at the future, from my understanding, I want to tease this out a bit, is rather than looking at an individual thing and asking, where is it projecting? Where's ChatGPT going to be in 6 years? Where's that going to? You talk about finding the convergences between lines, or the sort of fuzzy grey zones to just decide where lines are moving and intersecting. Can you take us into that philosophy a little bit?
Right, so we do release this annual tech trends report every year, and it's not just tech, it's science, it's a bunch of things now, at South by. And I always try to remind people that the trends themselves are not the end, they're the beginning. So all a trend is really an indicator of movement to the future. Now, we have a model, and there are criteria that have to be met. So when we are determining what are trends, we're not like, asking people what they think. There's modeling that happens. But if you start fixating on one trend only, and especially if you get it wrong, you completely lose sight of what's coming next. So I can give you a quick example having to do with South by. Do any of you remember Foursquare? Yeah, it's like, there's like some 20-year-olds in the room who are like, I don't know what you're talking about. 100,000 years ago, I'm joking, it was like 10 years ago maybe, there was a thing you could do. Did you ever use Foursquare?
Oh yeah.
Where you could, there were 3 competing apps. There was Foursquare, there was Gowalla, which I don't know if anybody ever actually, did any of you, super nerds, anybody actually use that thing?
Gentleman front row over there.
It's my husband, he doesn't
count.
And then Scavenger, which had no vowels and was completely not conceived well. Anyways, so the idea was you would be in a place and you would open the app and you would sort of check in to let others know that you were there, and then you would earn some type of cool digital merit badge.
If you stayed there long enough, you were the mayor of the local restaurant if you went there more often than other customers, for example.
That's correct. And if you were some people, you could figure out how to cut the line. There was a place that I used to just drive by on my way to work, and I would check in on my way there. And then I became the mayor, and then on Sunday mornings, we did not wait online for brunch.
There you go.
Anyways, so I remember that year, and probably the year following, everybody thought the trend was gamification. Like everything is going to be gamified. And that was all anybody was talking about, because at South by in particular, there was such a huge presence. That's all that was really happening. And you had to zoom way out to see that was just the modality. That was the thing that's happening right now, but the actual trend was much more boring. It had to do with location-based services, which again is like super boring and nobody wanted to talk about that. But if you were the business that invested in that versus like making badges, then you were the ones who won in the long term. That's what's happening right now with, I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about AI, but ChatGPT, like chat-based AI systems, that's just the version, the modality that exists today that you're familiar with. You have to zoom way out to see what the actual underlying trends are. And typically, again, focusing on those trends and how they start to collide with the other things that are happening, that's what actually shapes the future. So you kind of have to track many different things at once.
You did a great example in Austin where you had people holding one of the old magic eye type puzzles, and too close you can't see it, too far away you can't see it, tease it, and the South by logo emerge. And you say sometimes leaders tend to look very narrowly in a small thing and don't have that focus point.
Right.
But the thing that I found most fascinating about your presentation on March 11th this year in Texas, and there's a point there where you start talking about ChatGPT, and you say quite confidently on March 11th, some of you might have heard of this. I know the vast bulk of you haven't done anything with it yet. Let me show you how you can build a business case. And at March 11th, that was mind-blowing what you did. March 14th was when GPT-4 dropped, and suddenly everyone started talking. So we're about to, if it's all right, walk through some of the things you said back then. Has your needle moved much in the last 5 months, 6 months of the GPT-4 era?
Yeah, so, well, there's GPT-4. There's also GPT-V, which sounds like a sexually transmitted disease.
Yes.
But is in fact a way for you to use OpenAI's system with an image. So you can upload, I just did this the other day, I uploaded a screenshot of a P&L. So this is somebody's budget, and it wasn't the data itself. It was just a screenshot of the data laid out, and I asked the system to, it was a hospital budget, the hospital was failing. And I said, look for 8% savings, bottom line savings year over year, without having to lay off staff. So basically, how could the hospital do better? And it worked. So anyhow, what has changed? The main thing that's changed is everybody's degree of fear and FOMO. FOMO is the fear of missing out. So the main thing that's changed since March is, can I tell you a story?
Please.
Sorry. One of the fun things we're all going to learn is that when I'm not giving a speech, you're going to get to see how my actual brain works. So it's a lot of this. Good luck keeping up with me being all over the place. What was I saying? Yeah, story.
You're about to tell me a story, FOMO.
Okay, so I realize how this is going to sound, so just whatever. I was in the Hamptons, and I was at this party, and I got cornered by a venture capitalist, somewhat well-known VC, who comes up to me with his drink, and he's like, because of AI, he's like, let me ask you a question. And then because he's an American VC, there was no actual question. He just like talked at me. But here's what he said. What he said was, he laid out his thesis for how that with all these AI developments and what OpenAI is doing and Microsoft and Google and everybody else, the whole all of humankind was going to be completely destroyed soon. And he's going on and on and on about the end of life, the end of humanity, and he's smiling. Dude is excited to tell me this, and I'm like, so like 15 minutes have gone by. I want to be literally anywhere else but having to listen to this dude, and then he like abruptly told me that like, don't you agree? And I was like, I don't know, man. It's like 9:30 in the morning. You're already, I don't know what you're drinking, but I want coffee and to be anywhere else but right here talking to you. So I walked away. What was the question you asked me?
The question I was asking you. So how much things have, because it is, because
oh, that's why I said that.
Because
yes.
because I remember that March moment, because for myself and for a lot of people in the audience, as the parent of a school-age child, the first a lot of people heard of ChatGPT was your kid's school reaching out saying, "Don't panic, we've banned ChatGPT."
Yes.
And as a parent, you read this email and go, "Cool, is that like some form of vaping technology or something I haven't heard of?
Okay.
But in that 6 months, it's become the topic du jour for everyone.
Yes.
How much has that changed some of these trends we're about to dive into?
Right, so that's why I wanted to tell you that story.
Yeah.
Because the point was, I've been trying to get executives to pay attention to AI for the better part of 20 years. All right, and the real question is, why are all of you suddenly, like, AI is kind of an obscure area of technology. So the question is, why is everybody suddenly talking about something that actually requires a significant understanding of technology? And the answer is because in November of 2022, OpenAI released its ChatGPT product to the world. And it took a little while to catch on, but that's really the genesis of what happened. Now, we all conveniently forget that in February of 2020, they released GPT-2, which was, or sorry, they didn't release it. They released a press release about GPT-2 saying, we have just invented this technology that is the most dangerous technology that's ever existed. It's so, like, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm pretty close to what the press release said. It's so dangerous, we cannot release this to the general public. And then, to be fair, COVID happened, so we were thinking about other things. But it's not like there's been any GPT police, like going around trying to figure things out. We've had 3 years. So the main thing that's happened is fear, abject fear of this stuff, which explains the message that you got from your school, and the complete fear of missing out, which explains the weird VC guy who was giving me this diatribe about people dying. That actually has a material impact on what happens next. Because the thing that's happening in AI right now is money. Just companies, investors, people throwing money at AI, tons of startups that were not doing very well that are suddenly, whatever the name is, .ai, right? And so that's what's happening. That has me more scared than the technology itself. And the reason is because when this much money starts flowing into something, at some point, everybody's going to expect commercialization and a return on that investment. This is what happened in the 80s. So in the 1980s, we went through a similar period. There were these crazy promises made. The technology at the time was quite promising, but it really wasn't capable of doing what everybody thought that it could do, and that caused all the funding to dry up. Here we are, there's now lots of positive use cases. The thing that concerns me is leaders are terrified of missing out on these things, so they're just like saying, yes, we're gonna join with you. Here's our data. Train it so that we can use it. And others are throwing huge piles of money at this, and nobody's like taking a measured approach and being a pragmatist and like making good decisions.
And so the format of your presentation and the way you like to do these things is lots of individual things that are happening that are brought together under major convergences.
Sure.
And you proposed 2 significant convergences in Austin. Do you mind if we walk through those? Because I think they'll be really interesting. The first one, it's the end of the internet as you know it. Going forward, everything is information.
Right.
Rather than searching the internet searches you. Search version 3, informational, conversational, not just typing, not just hyperlinks. Drill down into me for me more the concept that this is the end of the internet as we know it.
Sure. So at the moment, the internet is still very two-directional. I know it feels like it isn't, but it's still very much you typing something in, and the thing that comes back to you is typically a list that requires more manual. I mean, it's amazing and it's wonderful and it's shocking that it all works. But if we think of search, it's still you triangulating what it is you're trying to get to, and then seeing page after page of results. So I think the thing that we all now recognize is that this technology removes the friction from that equation, and rather than typing in something and having to scroll, you're just going to get to an answer. So you can, depending on whether or not you've got a personal or a commercial account on Google, you can use something called Bard, and that will change your search so that you just get the answer. I can't use this because our work accounts are pretty locked down, but I did use my daughter's computer. I wish I had a screenshot to show you. I didn't, she changed her cursor so that it looks like it's some kind of marshmallow from some anime. So she's 13. And I'm like, I couldn't get the marshmallow to get onto the little thing that I was trying to click on, and I'm like, well,
Mum, okay,
I'm
I'll show you
old
how
now.
to use the marshmallow.
Yeah, exactly, which was awesome. But here's what happens. So if you type in cats, it just spits out, sort of everything that you could possibly want to know, which is great. I mean, that's much better for people who want information fast. This is terrible for news organizations. And I've been saying this now for decades, but the issue is we are just going to get answers, and you have to be a special type of person to take the many additional steps to go in and figure out where those answers came from. And that just fundamentally changes how we get information. I can give you other examples. There are plugins coming to some of these services. So there's ChatGPT, there's Bard, there's Claude, and the best way to think about these is not as individual applications or chatbots, but as ecosystems. So there are plugins coming either the end of this year or early next, where let's say you type in a recipe on one of the systems, here's the parameters, I've got lactose intolerance, I like spicy food, tell me what to eat, right? Spits out a recipe. I think a lot of people have done that. But then it might look at your calendar, because these things are going to be multimodal. It'll look at your calendar, oh, you don't have time to go to the grocery store. Do you want these groceries ordered and delivered so they get home when you're home and you can cook it? So all of that stuff would happen on the back end, which is very convenient. It will so I've already done this. It auto-populates Instacart. Does that exist in Australia?
We understand the concept.
Okay, so it auto-populates, wonderful. It auto-populates Instacart with all the ingredients to make the thing. Now here's what's interesting. When I did this, it was all the same brand. Yes, so for those of you who work in consumer, like CPG, retail, you probably just got like a shiver, because this completely destroys your business. because if what I'm doing as a consumer is setting parameters, I just want whatever's cheapest, and maybe we're going to do that anyways. But we all know that there are other tricks and tools that happen in marketing to get people to change their mind and convert them to what you want. But it's just going to, again, like if you remove all these points of friction to just get people what they want, that is why Amazon exists today and why it is such a powerful business, because it removed all those points of friction. So if it's the case that we are continuously creating data all day long in different forms, and there are systems that can mine, refine, commercialize, use those data in ways to make our lives friction-free, that fundamentally changes our relationship to machines and the relationship that data have to third parties. It completely upends the internet. I mean, it totally changes everything. And this is, like, we are alive for that Genesis moment. If you can recognize it as that, and start thinking through the implications, you will survive and thrive potentially.
You talk about the great, not osmosis, OS, but the great ICE moment, AI, osmosis.
Yeah.
What is osmosis?
Well, it's a dumb word I thought was gonna catch on and didn't.
Let's do what we can here today. Let's make it massive in Sydney. Let's trend it for a while. What is everyone hop on your social media of choice right now. We don't care. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat,
don't do
Tinder,
it on
hashtag osmosis.
Yeah.
What is it?
So the concept that I was trying to relay was that AI is really an umbrella term that encompasses many different types of technologies. If we achieve this moment where we are data, which is sort of where we're headed, through our gesture, through speaking, through recognition, through everything else, and we have automated systems meant to continually make decisions for us to remove friction, then where is that line between human and machine, right? And all of this is becoming invisible to us as well. My concern here is that we are going to rush forward because it feels very much like our lives will be better, will be more fulfilled with all of this technology in it. And at some point, we're going to realize that we've lost agency. that the consolidation of power that exists right now among just a handful of technology companies becomes even more entrenched. The big story that everybody has missed in all of this, by the way, is that none of this works without cloud services. So in order to make these AI systems work really well, you need something called a GPU. You actually need tens of thousands of them. And it's not like anybody has those in their living rooms. So at the moment, these partnerships are being formed between these companies that feel like they're trying to, like OpenAI originally was meant to be open source. There are several of these companies that all have partnerships with big tech. So you've got Microsoft and OpenAI, you've got Google, or you've got Amazon and Hugging Face, Amazon and Anthropic, which is a competitor to OpenAI, founded by some of the same people. So all we're seeing, not a reordering, but rather these companies with very powerful tools aligning themselves with tech companies who are also cloud providers. Again, I think this is the story that everybody's missed, and it has a profound impact on, everything going forward. Here's another, I think, point that's been missed. We talk all the time about bias, which is a real thing. What we don't talk about is homogeneity, meaning when Google announced its competitor, or its chatbot product publicly, it was a huge disaster. It made huge mistakes, and it was a public nightmare, public relations nightmare. So what started to happen is the different systems now will not give answers unless they are, the hallucinating is not happening as much. And as a result, we're seeing less creativity. So to me, it's a little bit like going to one of these mega grocery stores. Like, here's what a future of AI could look like from the consumer's point of view. It's a little bit like being in a mega grocery store in the United States, huge, like Texas-style, enormous, ridiculously huge grocery store that has abundant amounts of food, right? You go to the produce section, huge, enormous. But basically, it's just apples, oranges, and bananas, right? So you have a ton of it, but it's only 3 things. I'm a little concerned that this future that's being shaped is going to be really buttoned up and locked down because none of these companies want the public relations nightmare. And also, there's this consolidation of power, which, again, I just think we need to be thinking through.
Yeah, because then they say if one of the ways these things are scored is how well they do at certain tests, it
That's
seems
right.
more of these are now being brought on just to make sure they ace the biology test.
Right.
So you chart, when you present these things, sort of 2 possible scenarios for 10 years from now, optimistic and catastrophic. Optimistic, cloud providers were not walled off. Proprietary data was not kept in moats. You had multi-cloud systems. No one tech company could concentrate power. We do get transparency in models, transparency in training. You opt into data sharing rather than just having it harvested from you when you don't even realise it. That could lead to a life that's easier, more seamless, more secure. The streaming was an example you gave in Austin, for example. Paint that optimistic world for us.
Right, and let me give you a quick caveat. When I am giving scenarios on stage, it's easiest to digest those when they're binary, so optimistic and catastrophic. When this work is done for real, because we build scenarios for companies all over the world, it's not optimistic and there's like different models that get used, and usually it's just here's 5 different outcomes kind of thing. And then we perform a gap analysis to help the company figure out what to do, where to play, how to win. Now, the optimistic framing is that there are basically, how do we encourage the companies that have the wherewithal and the technical competence to build these tools, but how can we do it in a way that ensures we have choice, we have agency, that there's some attention to data? Here's a good example. I was on my way to, last week before, somewhere in Europe, Oslo.
Hamptons.
The Hamptons, yes. I totally strike you as a Hamptons girl, don't I? The answer is no, I don't. Anyway, so I was sitting in the airport waiting for a connecting flight. Friend texts me, do I know that all of my books have been scraped and put into something called Book 3? So this is this was a primary corpus that was used to train the latest version of OpenAI's system. all of my books. So there were 187,000 books that have ever been published in the history of humanity. That is a big part of what trained this new system. So the answer was, no, I didn't know that. Nobody asked, which means I don't have any, first of all, I couldn't say no, because I didn't have an opportunity to. My works, I have no commercial, so I don't get any of the commercial stuff back. I don't have any say in how any of this is being used or by whom, right? And I hope for your sake that you never ask GPT how to cook something, because I'm the one that's going to be part of the answer, and I should never cook anything. So yeah.
The catastrophic version, information chases you around. Marketing and advertising exist, but human marketers and advertisers are gone.
Yeah.
Aggressive data scraping leads to the death of search. It's replaced by aggressive curation and recommendation. The more we use the information ecosystem, the more we're priming the AI models. We're surrounded by information, but we can never get what we want.
Right, so this is not quite the depiction of AI the end of days, right, AI that we're all hearing about. The analogy that I think works better is paper cut. So a lot of what you're hearing is that AI is gonna, take all of your jobs and then murder you in your sleep, right? I mean, that's basically all that we're hearing.
We've all seen the Will Smith film. We're there, the robots are there, we're all cool, the robots are doing stuff. One idiot says one nasty thing to one robot, the robots go, well, fuck it, let's just kill them.
Yep.
And bang.
And bang. And then Jada Pinkett Smith tells you many years later that Will Smith and they've been divorced for 6 years.
Exactly.
And it's like, that's not cool. Why didn't anybody tell us?
Next thing you know, slap across the face.
It was a big slap.
Oh, exactly.
A double slap.
Exactly.
All right.
Anyway.
Anyways, so here's the situation. The situation is our lives can be materially different and made really worse in ways that are largely invisible to us at the beginning. But over time, sort of decisions that have these compounding effects so that just life isn't the way that it was before. So the good analogy here is think of a paper cut. If you get one paper cut, it's painful, it's annoying, and it might distract you a little bit during the day. You get through it. It eventually heals. You get a couple of paper cuts, it's kind of on your mind a little bit more. Imagine for a moment your entire body covered in, let's say, 5,000 paper cuts, okay? I want you to actually visualize it. Picture your face, picture your hands, your feet, your rear end. Think about trying to sit down. Think about trying to eat or drink something. Think about having a fun night with your partner, right? You're still alive. You're not gonna bleed out. But life is absolutely nothing like it was before. So that's what I think the dystopian scenario really looks like. We're all alive. The robots didn't murder us in our sleep. But we are not living the same type of lives that we were. Here's a good example. Here's a weird kind of good example. Did you guys hear the music? I don't want to call it. Was the music playing in here? We heard it backstage, like smooth jazz while you were waiting. Okay, with apologies to any of you people out there that make that music, I'm not going to apologize. That is terrible, terrible music. So imagine that that's what gets recommended over and over again. So turns out Spotify, if you put on random, or if you're looking for new music or new recommendations, it's not recommending everything to you very personally. It's taking, it's laws of averages. So it's looking at what the vast majority of people are listening to, and then your recommended personal playlist is gonna wind up being very similar to other people's. Now, that is not a lifetime full of paper cuts or whatever, but it's different,
but it's beholden upon me to be brave enough to occasionally listen to some new music or go to a new channel.
Okay, fine, but how are you going to get it? This is what I'm talking about. So part of it is
I'll hit the new music on Spotify button.
Right, but you're going to get the same sort of. So again, I listen to metal, so I'm like the worst possible. I recognize, but I'm thinking of pop music, which I don't really listen to. everything might start sounding the same over time. So this is the thing that I think we're missing, especially when it comes to creativity. I think a lot of people right now believe that we just have unfettered access to be as creative as ever, and AI systems are gonna unlock our brains, we're gonna invent all kinds of crazy new things. I actually think the opposite is gonna start happening. I think that the thing that we're missing here is there's gonna be less choice, there's gonna be more directed decision making. It's gonna feel like life is very frictionless and convenient when what's actually happening is you're being directed, either obviously or in a way that's not so obvious, to make the same couple of choices. And then there's all the geopolitical other stuff out there.
The good thing was when you scored those two scenarios in terms of likelihood, the optimistic and the catastrophic, you went optimistic 20%, catastrophic 80%. So on that positive note, let's move on to your second, but your second conjecture, a really interesting one, a convergence. We've entered the assistive computing age. You'll never have to think on your own again. And this is probably a lot more of the space that a lot of people have put their mind to over the last 6 months, when they've seen things like GitHub Copilot helping people write computer code, when they've started to write emails themselves and construct work pieces with interactions with models and things like that. Walk us through that scenario, the assistive computer era. We'll never think on our own again.
Right, so again, I think this is where people get a little confused. So think of the last time that you did long division in your head. Well, actually, that's not a good question for you, because you probably do it all the time.
About halfway through your last answer, I was just running through a couple, just keeping myself in the game.
Very good. Hint taken.
No.
Right, so my point is, like, when I was coming up in middle school, there was a big debate over whether or not those of us taking algebra should be able to use calculators. And, here we are, and all of you have a calculator. Anybody with a phone has a calculator at this point. Similarly, anybody who does any word processing online or using a computer, you're using Word, you have to now go in and actively shut off autocorrect, right? Which means that learning how to spell things is maybe not as mission critical as it used to be. So these are examples of assistive tools which all of us use all day long. I think that is where we are headed with AI. So AI, again, is just many different types of technologies, and the best way to think of them is as assistive tools going forward if you know how.
The positives of those are incredible. Surgeons looking at a body, getting real-time feedback of which tumours to remove, or being instructed by a woman on the other side of the world who's done 2,000 of these operations when you've done none, and she's effectively operating with your hands. Every kid in the world having access to equally smartest, the best tutor on any topic ever. Where's the downside in the assistive computing era? Where's the downside in never thinking on your own again?
Sure. What could possibly go wrong? So let me give you 2 examples. I was dealing with, let's just call them some important economists, last week at a big meeting. And economists drive me crazy because they're just as bad as the folks in insurance. We do a lot of work with insurers and insurance companies, but talk about like not being open to alternative ideas about the future. Economists just refuse to use modern tools. So there were some big numbers that came out, consumer price index in the United States, and the headline was like, economists think that such and such grew since last year. It's like, we live in 2023. We are literally about to have people living on the moon. You tell me you can't figure out what happened with the economy, a couple months ago. So this is a case where you could use real-time data and systems to tell in real time what the strength of an economy actually is. That actually is boring, but it has some real-world important bearings like interest rates. We keep screwing around with interest rates in the United States because we're not quite sure what's happening, and that has an impact on everybody everywhere on the planet. Well, imagine not having to guess, right? And just being able to sort of tinker in real time. That would be huge. So that's one big change. I had another one off the top of my head, but now I'm forgetting what it was.
One of the things that I think is fascinating as we move to the language command systems are that I have a theory called the 90-10 theory, and that is for most types of software or devices that we interact with, 90% of us don't get much more than 10% of the capacity out of that thing. And
Sure.
like this one, a few years ago when I met the love of my life and I wanted to clean up my life and start getting fit, do a bit more exercise, and I spoke to some athlete mates of mine and said, I want to get one of those, mate, get a Garmin. Got to get the Garmin. The Garmin's just got all the athletes just do the Garmin. Just get the Garmin. I remember
I've got a Garmin.
Yeah, right. So the instruction booklet for this thing, right? That thick. If I'm going for a jog with this on and I tear a hammy, I think this could probably drive me to the hospital and do the operation itself, right?
Yep.
I use it to count my steps.
That's a very expensive step counter.
And occasionally, if my wife and I are going on an awesome hike, we might download the map. I don't use this for more than 10% of what it can do.
Okay.
But it's the same with Adobe. It's the same with Keynote. It's the same with unless you've virtually got a PhD. Like if anyone has to make a Keynote here, you don't make the Keynote if it's a big one for you. You go and get some professional designer who has spent thousands of bucks doing courses on making Keynote so they can charge you thousands of bucks to make the deck.
Yeah.
Now, when that stuff becomes commanded just by language, and you say, do we not remove this barrier of niche expertise and just make the thing that drives us all truly our creativity and our passion, because we've got so many more of these tools at our command now?
Right. So I think at the heart of this question is what happens to jobs to some degree, right? So let's go back to that Muzak for just a moment. If you think of, if you can sort of think of a map of things that are useful but invisible, so Muzak is meant to, again, with apologies to professional music makers, it's meant to blend in. It's meant to be not provocative in any way, right? It shouldn't distract you. So I think in that case, in that area of creativity, yeah, I mean, an AI system could be deployed to create that. Right, so this was last fall when there were rumors of a writer's strike. I got a phone call from a studio exec, Hollywood studio exec, who wanted to know how soon these systems would be ready to maybe start using as part of the writing process. And I was like,
sort of hypothetically, can you?
Right, and I was like, tell me what you're actually asking me. And basically he was like, just like, do we need the writers? Like, and I was like, so I paused, because the honest answer is, if you have something like a procedural, so this is like in the US we have Law and Order, I guess that's everywhere. That is a formula. That formula really hasn't changed in 20 years.
Yep. 8 minutes in, that guy did not do it.
Right, so exactly, and then dun-dun, it did. So it's formulaic. It doesn't mean that's bad, it's just it follows a formula and it takes in real world headlines. So that actually is a good candidate to have 80% be automated. And then writers come in and polish off the last 20%. But for the vast majority of creative work that we all love and enjoy, that's just not something an AI system is going to be able to accomplish in a way that makes sense. There's a great show on HBO, I don't know if it's made it outside of the US yet, called The Righteous Gemstones. Danny McBride, you can train all the models you want on his brain, and it's just never, like an AI system's never going to do whatever's going on, up there. So I think that again, if we are thinking about these as assistive tools rather than as replacement tools, we're gonna be better off. And let me end this piece by saying one quick thing. So at that same Hamptons, party, there was a bank CEO that also came up to me and wanted to have a talk about bottom line. So could he start using AI to reduce headcount? So like how many people could we get rid of with AI systems? And the answer is, in the very short term, yes, there will be jobs where an AI system is going to do better, like a call center to some degree. But what will wind up happening is we actually are going to have a need for many, many, many more jobs than exist today. And so if you laying people off and you think that you're going to have a permanently smaller workforce without planning for what happens 3 to 5 years from now, you are going to have a massive challenge. And again, I think this is the thing that people are missing.
And one of the challenges there is, with the greatest of respect to all educators in the room, education is not traditionally an industry that moves quickly.
Right.
And we're still chalking and talking in universities and in schools. And I get the impression you're worried about us giving the skill set required and the educational systems required to be able to cover that sort of evolution and change you're talking about.
Right, so that was the hilarious thing. I feel like it was like early last year, everybody banned like GPT, right? They were banning AI. The New York City school system banned it. And now just a few months later, there's special courses that you can learn, right? You know, everybody was worried about jobs going away. There are now job postings for prompt engineers. So these are the people that write, you know, whatever, that are like hundreds of thousands of dollars. At any moment in time where we have a soul-crushing amount of deep uncertainty, which is right now, you're going to see these crazy pendulum swings, which is, you know, which makes sense, whether it's education or something else.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a couple of, we're looking in the gaps, and that's how we're seeing the bigger pictures, but let's take a couple of individual line, push them out. Mm-hmm. Take some moonshots here. Blow our minds with some technologies or applications or things you think will be part and parcel of the world 5 years, 10 years from now that aren't at the moment, that just really change things.
Sure. So one huge change, and again, I'm hesitant to give you a date, but one huge change is that screens will be going away. Over the past couple of years, I've seen different prototypes of glasses. Obviously, we've heard some of that, but devices that are meant to more blend in. One of the devices that I saw is a brooch, like a button, that is black, that's meant to just blend in with whatever you're wearing. So it's not obvious, you don't see it. It has a screen, a projector, and a speaker. And this thing is meant to just be with you all day long and take in all the data everywhere. So right now, you and I are wearing these watches that are recording data from our bodies, basically, and location. These buttons will take in everything else. So imagine that you had that on, and after this session right now, the generative AI system that works with that button spits out a report of all the highlights, okay? And that's just prepared for you. And then the next version of that maybe is highlights in general, and then here are some insights specifically for you, because this system knows you and your business and whatever else it might be. Imagine being in a situation where you've got food. So I'm a competitive cyclist, and I have to kind of watch what I eat. Mm-hmm. And imagine sitting down for a meal and having a camera sort of look to see what you're about to eat and tell you whether or not to eat that, you know, in that particular moment. Or,
because me, that's currently just a little guy on my shoulder going, you know you shouldn't do this.
You're not supposed to eat that.
You know you shouldn't do, but how yummy is this going to be?
Right, but here's the difference. So this is where I want you to open up your minds a little bit, because this isn't about losing weight. The future maybe is about optimization. In this particular moment, should I eat more of this thing or that thing because I want to tweak my, you know, my brain power to do whatever.
Especially based on data it's been getting from your body temperature, your sleep patterns, where you are in relation to the race you've got coming up, your general different biomarkers.
That's right.
Smell prints you talked about.
Yeah. So again, there's researchers right now working usually for other purposes on things like what are the molecular profiles of smells. There's a collar that some folks have made that are intended to go along with gaming. So let's say that you're playing Zelda and you're out in a field and there's grass, so you can smell the grass, right? But if you could have the molecular profile of that, you could start to replicate anything. So who's the beefy Australian guy?
Chris Hemsworth.
Chris Hemsworth.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine he has like a signature.
I could take a long ass drink of that glass of water, don't you worry.
Imagine he has like a signature scent or something, and being able to have the scent collar on, our olfactory nerves are very, very powerful, and in some cases, scent is a more powerful, it's more powerful than anything else. So imagine you're watching a movie with him, and he comes on, and he smells in a particular way. You could then like have that scent be present in other moments if you need.
You talk about a device.
I didn't mean it that way.
Oh dear, who would you like to be with tonight, darling? I'll just go and put the smell collar on, turn the light off, and he or she will be here in just a couple of minutes.
But, okay, we're all laughing, but you should mark your calendar. Like, you might be like, holy shit, 10 years from now, they totally told us that was coming.
But there's a fascinating one. You say if we start to analyse people's fMRI readings when people are having certain, when thinking of certain things and having certain images, you may well be able to recreate from monitoring what someone's truly thinking about. You think it's not unrealistic that in the future law enforcement could say to you, well, I just want you to think back to that night, what happened, and you could be getting scans going, there is no image of her husband in that photo, he was in that image, he was not there in the room at the time.
Right, so generative AI, so again, we've got to get out of this binary of like AI is going to come and kill us in our sleep, because, and first of all, where does that come from? Part of it comes from incredibly great storytelling throughout many, many years of writing and film, right? The issue is generative AI can do other kinds of things in the real world which are absolutely horrifying. So researchers are studying generative AI and with fMRI, so this is a functional MRI. Usually this is for a really good purpose, like helping people who are paralyzed regain some of their ability to move around. But the implication is some researchers have already used this technology to measure and map activity and recreate memories. Okay, so something happened to you, being able to harvest those thoughts and reconnect them as a short little movie or short something or another.
There's areas of psychotherapy, et cetera, where that could be a tremendous positive.
Sure.
It could also be used for...
It could also backfire, right. So my question is, something for us to think about, is there a future in which law enforcement, we're going to need a search warrant for our brains, right? Where law enforcement may be ordered, you may be ordered to go into a functional MRI, and it's really hard if somebody asks you questions about a thing to block out and force yourself not to think.
It's like a polygraph in a much more modern, powerful age.
Right. Here's another terrifying example. Deep fakes. Deep fakes are when you superimpose something else onto somebody else's body. So there's an entirely new area of medical deep fakes. So somebody has already figured out a way to take what looked like a non-cancerous scan of tissue and insert a tumor, or in other cases, have a scan of somebody with a tumor, automatically remove that. And again, you might think of, well, like, that's stupid, who would do that? And my answer is, can you imagine if today dehospitals have to deal with ransomware where their systems are being locked down. Tomorrow, they may have to deal with medical deepfakes. Some people getting chemotherapy treatment that don't need it, others not getting the treatment that they need. And to be fair, it may only last a week or two before people sort of figure out what's happening. But the longer term impact has to do with trust. What happens when this happens one or two times? How will you be absolutely sure that your scans are what they say they are? This is the real problem that I see starting to emerge, and that goes back to the thing about the paper cuts.
We're getting close to time. On a more positive note, something I see coming down the tubes, and it's moments away, however you define a moment, we must be close to a world without language barrier anymore. We must be close to, I know there are already some apps and things that can do it in almost real time, but surely we're not far away from, I talk into this in English. She hears it in Icelandic.
Yeah.
She replies in Icelandic. I hear it perfectly in English in real time. The idea that there will be places in the world you couldn't go because you didn't speak the language. It's for Aussies, obviously, it's challenging for us. We've all been on that work call with someone from the States and someone from London, and the dude from the States never says, don't worry, I'll get up at 2 in the morning the next time. We are in a tough time zone.
Yeah.
Australians who work for organisations that deal internationally will be expected to work with anyone at any time, anywhere in the organisation. You won't be able to say, sorry, I don't speak Dutch.
Yeah, yeah.
But the idea of a world where, with reasonably close to good translation, we can all communicate together, we've never had that before. I find that fascinating.
It is fascinating. I think it's also concerning. Let me tell you, so I actually, sorry, I know you want to end on a positive note. I actually think that's...
Doing my best, just doing everything I could.
I actually think that's a really terrifying proposition. Let me tell you why. So I speak Japanese fluently. My sister and I were in Thailand years ago, and we were in the elevator with a Japanese couple who were talking about my sister in some pretty, like they were saying some pretty mean things about her. And when they kind of smiled at me. And then in Japanese in a way that was like overly, if you ever want to be super rude to somebody in Japanese, you're just overly polite. And then if you're overly polite, anyways, so in an overly polite way, I was like, you guys, you should know that lots of people speak Japanese outside of Japan, and you know, and they were completely like humiliated. It was horrible for the rest of the, I didn't really play it through. For the rest of the time, they were like trying to make up for it, and they were trying to be too nice, and then I had to chat with them the rest of the time. Anyways, imagine going through life and being able to hear what anybody was saying at any time. So like, there's a part of that, you know, like being on the fly on the wall. People ask, like, would you rather fly or be invisible for superpowers? What would you rather be?
Would I rather fly, or would I rather be invisible? I'd rather smell like Chris Hemsworth. If I had one superpower,
we can make that happen.
That would be it.
We can make that happen. I always, you know, a lot of people, actually men always want to fly, and there's a big gender change. But what happens when we actually can understand what everybody else is saying? What happens if those language models get tweaked? I mean, can you imagine misinformation when we have an automated translator system in real time? I worry about that. I think part of what's happening with technology is it's removing that friction seamlessly, quickly, and life is speeding up in a way that I think we're just not acclimated to. I mean, I think we're going to have some amount of almost like a digital whiplash, like a technological whiplash. So I'm really excited about all the different things that these technologies will do. We didn't talk so much about biology, but there's a bunch here, you know, that indicates we're going to live longer, healthier lives. But I'm also really worried about the sort of the like impact of some of this on our ability to process and manage the change that's coming.
As we move towards the end of this session, for people who want to dive deeper into the hundreds and hundreds of pages of your futures report, I think there were exactly the devil's number of 666.
There were. It wasn't on purpose.
Findings in the last one. How do people access that?
Oh, sure. So all of our stuff is open source. So you can go to our website, which is the futuretodayinstitute.com, and download all of our reports, our methodology. I'm a strong believer that everybody should have some of the tools of futurists, and that's why we make everything open source, because the more people that are actively, not like pontificating about the future, but working on it for real, using rigor and data, the better off we're all going to be.
Fantastic. Now, Madonna got locked out of her own after party. You will be at your own after party when you're signing books one level up from here in just a few minutes. There was so much more we could have done, not within an hour as it turns out. Can you please thank the amazing Amy Webb, our opening keynote at South by Southwest Sydney. Thank you all so much for your attendance. Get out there now and get along the rest of your sessions. We'll see you over the next few days. Thank you very much.